Hola, ¿cómo están? Y bienvenidos a una nueva entrevista de Carta Política. Volvemos después de un largo tiempo, teníamos tiempo sin vernos, tiempo sin subir videos, tiempo sin hacer entrevistas. Es lo que pasa cuando uno tiene muchas ocupaciones, ¿no? Los parciales, la facultad, etcétera, etcétera. Nos ha ocurrido a todos en Carta Política. Recordemos que es un medio gestionado por estudiantes universitarios. Sin embargo, volvemos con todo, volvemos para analizar procesos políticos a lo largo y ancho de la Tierra, y sin ir más lejos vamos a empezar a prepararnos para el que sin duda alguna será el evento político del año a nivel global, ni más ni menos que las elecciones generales en los Estados Unidos, que van a tener lugar en noviembre de este año. ¿Y por qué estamos hablando de esto en enero? Bueno, porque ahora en enero, ahora el 12 de enero, comenzarán las primarias en los dos principales partidos de Estados Unidos, los demócratas, los republicanos. Van a abrir, como siempre, sus primarias con el caucus en Iowa, en el estado de Iowa, y nos acompaña un amigo que ya había venido en 2022 para hablarnos de las elecciones de medio término, las midterms, Gibbons. Él es analista y nos va a estar explicando un poco, bueno, el proceso político y la situación actual de las elecciones en su país. So this interview will be in English for obvious reasons. How are you, Sean? Welcome to Carta Política.
I'm good. I'm happy to be here.
We are happy to have you here. So we're gonna start. Well, in most countries, when a party holds primaries, they vote only once. I mean, just in one day throughout the country, and the winner is the candidate. This is clearly not the case. We have a process from all the year until November when you have two candidates. So this is clearly not the case. So how do primaries work in the United States? If you can, you could give us a little explanation.
So in America or the United States, political parties do host these primaries to have their members decide on a nominee before the general election. Historically, these contests happen over the course of several months, which allows candidates to travel around and campaign individually throughout different states throughout the primary process. And this is a tradition that maintains in place today. So all 50 states and U.S. territories host a primary election or a caucus. And it's kind of a complicated process. Each party has a different way of planning out their primary schedule and how these votes in the primaries are counted in order to decide on a winner. So there's plenty of controversy surrounding these elections, and there's often a lot of news that occurs before the process on the different schedules and everything, as we see in this cycle.
Okay, so we have primaries in each state, but we can see that in some states they speak about primaries, and in others they speak about caucuses. What's the difference? What is going to be done in Iowa the next week?
Oh, yes. So a primary is a more standardized election in which voters select their preferred candidate on a ballot, whereas a caucus is kind of a historical democratic process that we do in the United States, in which political parties host a local community event, and members of the party attend and discuss their vote over the course of a few hours, at the end deciding and tallying the ballots together. So the rules of each caucus heavily differs by party and by state. So each caucus is run differently and has a different set of rules, especially in the way that votes are tallied at the end, and how the tallies are counted for delegate systems for the primary process. Iowa specifically is planning to host their caucus on January 15th, and will be the first of many elections of this cycle. And it is a caucus election where people will meet in local community groups and discuss their votes before they go, or while they're attending.
It's more like an assembly.
Yes, an assembly type of election where you're meeting with your local neighborhood and community and kind of discussing candidates. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, well, for the first times, the Democratic Party will not have the results from the Iowa caucus immediately. I mean, usually the Iowa caucus is the first of the primaries in both parties, and we have the results immediately. And why is that suddenly changed?
Yes, so Iowa's traditionally been the first caucus for a very long time for both parties. They both have the Iowa caucus. However, since primary elections in different states are not always held on the same date, there's controversy on which states go first, as those states often have a much larger influence on who becomes the nominee than the states that vote later. So in this election cycle, the Democratic Party kind of argued that a lot of these early states that vote, specifically Iowa and New Hampshire, are not racially diverse and they don't really reflect the demographics of America. So they chose to make South Carolina their first primary state of 2024 because they believe it is more racially diverse and it reflects the demographics of the country better. Obviously, this did not bode well in Iowa and New Hampshire, and both states decided they still were going to hold some form of election on the normal date they usually do. In New Hampshire, the Democratic Party essentially decided those votes would not count towards this election in 2024, and that's still kind of going back and forth. In Iowa specifically, they had a compromise which says that Democrats will be able to go to their caucus or send a mail-in ballot, but the votes won't be counted until March 5th at a later date when other primaries are occurring.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, Sean. But, well, we are talking about a primary with a sitting president. So anyway, the Democratic Party primary is probably not so interesting this year. I mean, the normal thing is that the important primary is that of the opposition party when you have a sitting president. Let's talk about the internal affairs of the Republican Party. I mean, there looks since a long time ago that Donald Trump has, undisputed leadership, but can any other nominee, like, I don't know, Nikki Haley, Ron DeSantis, make a good challenge to that leadership?
Yeah, so like you said, in terms of the Democratic primary, it shouldn't be that controversial at all. It's very likely that Biden is going to continue and win. But going to the Republicans, in both Iowa, just the Iowa caucus, and in the rest of the country, it appears the Republican primary is overwhelmingly going in Trump's favor. All of the opinion polling shows him with a clear lead over his opponents, despite him not attending a single debate. Kind of expect the Iowa caucus to be an easy victory for Trump. And the real battle is going to be the battle for second place. A bad night for his challenger, Ron DeSantis, could cause him to want to drop out entirely, while a particularly good night in the second place finish for Nikki Haley could give her a lot of momentum for elections after that. New Hampshire is going to be voting the week after Iowa, and Nikki Haley's polling extremely well there. So good showings for her in these two early states could propel her into a 1v1 election race against Trump.
Okay, that's very interesting. Let's see. We have to wait for those results. So we have an atmosphere of, certainly the atmosphere is that in November, the protagonist of this story will be again Biden and Trump anyway. But do you think the primaries are a mere formality or they have something important to say?
So it does seem that both primaries will be a formality, but they do have things to say about both parties. It's the first presidential primary election in a long time where neither party is really going to have a competitive primary. As of right now, I mean, things can change, but as of right now, it doesn't look that competitive. For the Democrats, no prominent Democrats were willing to challenge Biden despite his age and his approval rating at this time, which shows that Biden is still very much in charge of the party. The challengers to Biden, namely Marianne Williamson and Dean Phillips, are the two largest challengers, are not really that well known, and they will likely be easily defeated. And in addition to that, Robert Kennedy Jr. was a primary challenger who dropped out and chose to run as an independent. So that makes the primary even less competitive. As for the Republican Party, as I stated earlier, the polling still shows that Trump is, winning the primary as of right now. But his performance in these polls showing he's doing so well kind of shows that he's still the leader of the party after, being the president. And there may be a little bit, some of the polls do indicate there could be a fight for the nomination if Nikki Haley performs well in the early states. But in the general outlook, at this time last year, Ron DeSantis was considered to be a major opponent to Trump, but his polling has collapsed since that date, and it appears he will not perform as well as he may have hoped when he entered the race.
It's not the same if we have Trump winning by 90% that we have him with only the half of the Republican Party behind him. So thank you very much, Sam. There is something you want to share with us before end this?
Yeah, I just have one more thing. So while the primaries may not be that interesting this cycle, the general election is flooded with many independent candidates that may shake up the general election. First, we have Robert Kennedy Jr., who dropped out of the Democratic primary, and he's running as an independent. There's also Cornel West, who's running against, running as an independent, kind of to the left of the Democratic Party. And then you'll have the usual third parties, libertarians and the Greens. All of these independents in the race could shift the results of the general election, and they could affect how the major parties campaign for votes. So while the primaries aren't looking to be that competitive, the general itself is going to be a very competitive race, it appears.
Thank you very much, Shen. Les quiero comentar que Shen nos va a estar acompañando durante las próximas semanas a lo largo del proceso electoral estadounidense para comentarnos un poco sobre su avance. Nuevamente, muchas gracias a todos los que nos están viendo y a todos los que nos van a ver. Con eso terminamos esta nueva entrevista de Carta Política. Les recuerdo que pueden seguirnos en Twitter como @politicacarta o en Instagram como Carta Política. Los invito a suscribirse al canal de YouTube y nos estaremos viendo en futuras entrevistas. Muchas gracias.